Hello, good morning, and welcome back to the Game Dev Show. Here today with Jason Story and Andrew, and I think Corvallis may be joining us in just a little bit, maybe some other people. So, good morning, welcome everybody. How's your day been going?
This is my first thing. Actually, I saw 2 jackrabbits in my backyard. I think one's pregnant, so I'm going to be a grandfather. So,
Finally!
yeah, it's taking this long, but one of them was very fat, so I'm pretty sure they're making babies. So
this is calling around, making some posts on Facebook.
Yeah, these little jackrabbit babies are going to be little on their e-bikes running around and
Oh, it's good. So what about your story? You got jackrabbits
no
too?
Jackrabbits. No.
Oh, that sucks.
I'll keep an eye out in the garden though. You know, who knows? Might have some news next week.
Nice.
Good stuff. Well, yeah, today I wanted to do a couple things. First, I want to make sure that we go back into doing some tips. So we're going to do a little round of tips of the day, talk about some useful things for developers. I also want to answer some questions in chat and talk a little bit about GDC 2024. So the conference just ended, was there last week. Andrew was there, a couple other people were there. I don't know if anybody else that was there is going to show up, but there's some interesting stuff, a couple Unity things, a couple non-Unity things I thought people would be interested in hearing about and learning about, possibly some interesting new opportunities there as well. So that's the plan for today. Anybody have anything else that you guys wanted to make sure we talk about this week?
Nope, that's I've got some tips for you.
You've got some tips.
I'm gonna learn you a lesson.
All right. Well, let's save those tips for just a little bit and start with some of the GDC news, so that way everybody can hang around for the really exciting tips. Talk about some of the stuff that we saw at GDC. So for me, there weren't a whole lot of giant announcements, but there were a couple of things that seemed really cool and very promising. On the Unity side specifically, there was a lot of work around URP and rendering performance. And it sounds like from the demos that I saw, there's now some options that are just going to speed up performance with basically no work from developers. And they're adding some functionality back there to make it a lot easier to work with it if you're an actual graphics programmer. But I was more excited by the performance stuff. I like whenever there's a checkbox that speeds things up, especially I don't know if you guys saw it, the AI based, there's a spatial temporal post some letter, some combination of 4 letters that I've lost track of, that essentially does AI upscaling. And the way that it was being explained is that it can essentially render the games down at half resolution, a quarter resolution, and then have that upscaler run, and nobody can tell the difference visually. You got to get down to 10% or lower before you could tell. And obviously that means a huge performance improvement, because if you've rendered a game at 4K versus rendering a game at 400 by 320, obviously massive difference. So that was, I think, the most exciting and most promising Unity specific thing. But what did you see, Andrew?
Well, wait, I want to touch on that for a second, because I didn't see that, but I've heard you talk about it multiple times, including last week, and I wasn't able to ask anyone about it. But okay, so I know enough about the screen resolution to know that when I went from an iPhone 4 to an iPhone 5 that was much higher resolution or something, it was like crazy slow. But going from 4K to 400 by 300 seems ridiculous. Like, how would you describe the difference in impact of that change? I mean, because in my head, it seems like something that's going 60 frames per second would now go like 8,000 frames a second or something. I don't know. How big of an impact is that change?
That's what I'm wondering. I haven't actually been able to try it out. I just saw little clips of the demos, so it sounded really promising to me. It seems like it would be massive, but there's got to be some cost in doing this too. It can't just be like that, you're getting 8,000 frames a second, although that's what I would feel like, if you're shrinking it down. It also, I guess, probably depends a lot on the type of game that you've got and where it's bound, if the resolution is a problem. But anything that wants to be a 4K game, I would think this is going to be a huge thing.
There's also a matter of at which point in render passes can you do it,
Mm.
because it depends on what your game is doing and what calculations it needs. It's kind of like doing any sort of draw calls, right? Like certain draw calls can only happen based on transparencies and what you need to do, and if you need depth buffers for this, that, or the other to pass the certain shaders, depending on what you're doing, you might still need to render a high resolution something in some cases for certain things if you need like accurate data versus generative data. So I don't know. Yeah, I guess it really did. We'd have to see stuff in action based on context. But I do think, but even just like data throughput, if you ever had to deal with any kind of file streaming or try to do like, yeah, a good example is video rendering. If you ever worked with any transcoding stuff of any kind, the difference between streaming 1080p versus 4K is comical. The amount of information, the cost of both the data transmission, the store, all that stuff, the time cost of like transcoding in real time and stuff. So even like cutting from 4K to 1080 would be phenomenal. It's like half the problems with internet throughput is down to the fact that the bandwidth costs of 4K and 8K video have gotten really high. So yeah, like I can see it being a really big deal. I don't know from a speed and frame rate thing. I'm not sure, simply because again, you have to offload the AI cost of actually doing it and whatever. But I do think in general, yeah, I definitely see it's going to be a big deal. I'm just a question of when and where. So
yeah. It seems crazy. That's all. It's like a magic button. That's what it sounds like, and I want to press that button.
That's what it sounded like to me.
There's also style transfer. One of the older papers from 2 Minute Papers, fantastic channel if you've not seen it. Basically, they look at any kind of research paper that's kind of a couple of papers down the line, and they watch the progress. One of them was taking video games and applying realistic filters over the top with AI. So it's not just a matter of saying, okay, we can upscale an image, but you could take an image that's set in Miami and switch it to a different location, or put something in a snowstorm by basically taking an image and saying, apply snow.
Snowstorm it.
Yeah. So there's a lot of interesting potential there, not just for realism, but for all sorts of other style trends. So like that to me is fascinating, not just the idea of performance, but the fact that we could even get to the point where it's more than just sepia toned filters. It's now like, actually, do you want it to look like a certain style or game or even location,
You don't want everything just in sepia tones?
Strangely enough, I've never been super impressed by sepia camera.
That was the new tech in like 1992 camcorders.
It's good stuff. Yeah. Turn it on once and then never hit the button again.
Yeah, and then ruin all of your video forever. Very destructive.
Yes. So what we were talking about there was a new feature, and I believe it's part of Unity 6 and not out now in the URP setup, where they've got this post-processing upscaling using AI stuff. It was one of the Centis projects that sounded really interesting. Was kind of the combination of Centis and rendering, which I think is where there's going to be a lot of game-specific value for AI is in that rendering side. I feel like that's going to be one of the strongest points because it's kind of global and beneficial everywhere. Like Story was saying, if you can make your game after it's rendered to look like it's in snow, and magically that starts to become the type of thing you can do, it's going to be really powerful.
I think I'm going to have to learn URP.
Yeah. I think everybody should probably start switching over to URP eventually, if they're not already. And most of the time, what I've seen, and I'm curious for the two of you, is that, and everybody in chat too, if you don't mind, just let me know. Do you use, when you start a new project, built-in render pipeline or universal, or maybe HD? But personally, I generally start projects in built-in, and then if I decide that I care about the visuals and I'm going to do something with it, I'll switch it over to URP. And for me, that's largely because of the startup time, the setup time, and I know that if I want to just go grab an import an asset, it's going to work in built-in. It may or may not work in URP. I might have to spend 5 minutes going and upgrading it, and if I don't care about the visuals, I'm doing a test, a demo, or something code related. Or even in the game that I have now, I'm just not at the point where visuals are something I want to spend time on. Then I'll just stick with built-in until I'm ready. But what do you guys do? What's your workflow?
There's a ton of URPs in the chat.
Yes, lots of URP in chat.
I do built-in, but this I'm caveat, right? Put an asterisk by my name because I'm putting stuff on the asset store. So I want to maximize my market, which means you can't currently downgrade from URP to built-in with a little button, but you can go the opposite direction. So it's much easier to ship in built-in, get that largest market share. But this is where, Unity 6, I think they said it's going to default to URP, which means a lot of new users are never going to use built-in. They're going to think URP is the new standard, which it will be, I guess. That's the whole point. So at that point, it means, I guess for a while, I'm going to have to ship in both built-in and URP, because anyone using Unity 6 is going to be screwed if I ship in built-in. They're just going to get the pink materials, and I'm going to get people messaging me in 1-star reviews and stuff. So currently built-in. I've never really used URP. I have a little bit. I've used HERP and URP just a little bit I've got these random ground textures on the asset store that nobody buys, but I used them for that, and to do blending of the ground and all that stuff. So
okay.
Yeah.
So you're mostly built in, but largely just because you're doing a lot of asset stuff.
Yeah, but also I'm lazy. I don't want to learn a new thing. Don't make me learn a new thing. Unless the new thing is going to blow my mind and make everything better, don't make me learn it.
Before Story answers, everybody in chat, do you think that URP should be the default, or they should leave built-in as the default for 6? Personally, I think switching to URP as the default would probably be good, which is really just a change in the hub, right? It's literally just changing the default in the hub. But what do you think, Story?
Well, to first answer, very similar to what you said, which is when 90% of what you do is write code, then most of these questions are sort of irrelevant. And so I often start in built-in because it's just faster. It just opens faster, works faster, there's less stuff to play with. But if I'm ever doing GIFs or demos, which people have seen a million times, I'll always make little example videos. I'll switch for that, because the big difference for me, even at a small scale, is even out of the box, the way lighting works. The default lights are just like a number intensity. But if you're using URP, you can actually set Kelvin values and things, which are quite nice if you understand 3-point lighting setups and that kind of thing. It's just a little bit nicer for those. So I'll usually upgrade, same thing. It's actually quite simple to upgrade. It's like two scriptable object assets, you drag them into the right place, and it's pretty quick to get going. So yeah, I normally start built-in into URP. And then I'll occasionally play with HDRP just because it's shiny, especially the fog volumes. I really love the fog volumes. But then to answer your question about default, I'd say it's about time. I mean, even though I start in built-in because it's faster, legitimately, the problem I have in general is that the Unity ecosystem is so fractured that any standardization is good standardization. I think it's a hard pill to swallow. And I go back to the biggest example of this, which is Unity used to have, and they still do technically, a lot of extension functions built in that were wrappers around get component. So every mono behavior could write .rigid body and get component rigid body pre-done for you as just a one-line thing. Same with get audio source, whatever. They didn't cache them even at the time, but they would basically have these getter functions because they wanted it to look like native behavior. And then they accepted that's probably not good practice to retain. And so they broke a lot of stuff when they ended up switching to the C# side exclusively. And a lot of people freaked out because almost everybody who was using the JavaScript style of writing, none of their stuff worked anymore. And yeah, there was turmoil for a bit, but the truth is that's one entire set less of things for people to support, problems to debug, issues to solve, and so on. And so in my opinion, even if there is stuff that I use, I would rather them pick a lane and lock it in. And so I would even say the same for things like the input system and for whatever. I would want to see more standardization just so that all future documentations, rules, and stuff is at least consistent. Because then if it's consistent and people have to use it for different use cases, you get more bug reports, which is more problems to solve, which means the singular thing gets better. If multiple people are using multiple different things because some are better for others, then you're going to end up getting fragmented use cases that only get more fragmented because they get fixed in the direction they're being used. And so you'll never get a cohesive answer. So yeah.
Jason Story for president.
I think that all makes sense. I think Jim's called something out here that's a little bit interesting too, and I'm curious what you guys both think about this, especially Andrew, because you probably dealt with this a lot. But it says a lot of problem with the URP is that a lot of the assets they try to convert just don't work without manual adjustments. And I found that that's usually when somebody has a custom shader on their asset to address something that wasn't there. do you think that that's I mean, obviously it's a problem, right?
Yeah.
But is there a good solution to that to make it so that like things can get converted over? I mean, I'm certainly no good at writing shaders, so I don't know if there's an easy way to convert over all the custom shaders. I'm gonna guess not, but
I mean, so the problem, as I understand it, is that URP and HGRP, those are also on versions and they change. So, and they always change in lockstep with the editor version. So one day, especially for an Asset Store publisher, and I think if Pavel were here, Nature Manufacturer, he would cheer me on when I say one day
you would probably have a lot of good stuff on this.
Yeah, he would be fuming. They'll wake up and they'll find that, oh, their package is broken, not because they did something, but because URP or HGRP suddenly changed and broke something that they were relying on. That's the root of the pain, I think, because for most standard shader things, you can upgrade. It's not an issue. It's just a button. It's a friction point, but it's not an issue. But these custom ones are very hard. So the solution that I've had for my shaders, because I have a few shaders that are custom, so I've made HGRP and URP versions, is to use Amplify Shader Editor, because with that I can make the shader in built-in, then bring that shader into a URP project. It will work in URP, export it, bring it into HGRP project, export it, save those as Unity packages. Then it will work. You just have to extract that Unity package, and the shader, the material will no longer be pink.
It's not a very good workflow for users that bought the stuff, though. And if the artists aren't going in and updating things, which they're definitely not going to do on most stuff,
then that's why you get some stuff on the Asset Store that's compatible with URP but not built in, because they did, But and I understand Shader Graph can do more of that now. It didn't use Shader Graph originally, if I'm not mistaken, was URP only, which really I never used it because of that, because I was not going to use URP years ago, and I couldn't do a URP only thing. So I've never actually used Shader Graph. I understand that might be different now, and probably will be different in the future. So maybe it's time to start using Shader Graph. But yeah,
Story.
I agree. Like, I don't really. Yeah, pretty much say, like, I don't have a lot to say on that, to be honest. I don't do a lot of shader work personally, so I as much as I have strong opinions, as everyone knows, I try to keep them the stuff that I have firsthand experience with. And so for me, I often work with artists, and so I wouldn't want to step on toes for workflows. I would say, just for me personally, though, like I said, I'm more looking at the long-term effects of the environment and the guides and the usage, and that's why I favor the sort of, because I've seen fragmentation in other fields. It's why Android was such a nightmare to develop for in early days, because of screen size resolutions and stuff. So I'm just looking at the macro problem, but on the individual stuff, I hear a lot of stories from people about this render pipeline missing a feature, or Shader Graph not having parity features for this, or the UI platform not having these particular features like world space rendering. But my answer to that isn't, okay, use the old one in perpetuity, because again, you get back to then there's never a reason to upgrade the new stuff. If the new stuff replaces and it doesn't have features you want, you've got a very justified angry mob complaining that it's missing features, and now it has to be fixed. It's no longer an optional thing, right? So there's pain points, and if we were removing one engine to move to another and you could never use the old one, then I could see an argument to be more cautious. But in a world where all old versions exist and you can just use one and not upgrade where needed, that's fine. But when there is an upgrade down the pipeline, I think that's a really good candidate to bite the bullet and make hard choices, to like have a friction point. Because if you're going to have a friction, you might as well do it properly and like use it to really enforce change.
Yeah, I think this URP thing is, I think we all agree it would be good to just make that the default, and then probably eventually just get rid. I mean, I think they've been talking about deprecating built-in for the last 10 years. So eventually do that. But yeah, get it as the default. Get it out there and make sure everybody's there. I think there's still a couple little problems, like Greg had mentioned, but just trying to get build size down. But I think they're like, I could be wrong on this. Powell could correct me next week, but I think they're around like 98% parity on there on just about everything, especially with the upcoming stuff that I saw coming. So,
parity is the most important thing, in my opinion, when moving from a one like when I'm honestly, as many people know, I'm working on New Humans, and I've been working on New Humans for a while. And one of the big things that has to happen is parity. I can't, not going to release New Humans that don't have the same things and features as the current humans. Parity is important when you update.
By the way, if you're watching live, don't forget to hit the like button. Good call, Martin. So yeah, other GDC stuff. I'm curious, Andrew, what was the best thing that you saw, or is there anything that you think everybody would be excited about? I've got a couple other little things, but
so unfortunately, I only got to walk around on the show floor for about 2.5 hours, and most of that time was literally for the day job. So I didn't get to see everything on the show floor. This is the first year in many, many years that I've not seen the Substance designer or Substance folks, which I don't know if they were there. I didn't even see the booth, so maybe they weren't there. But I always like to go say hi to this one guy there who's been very nice over the years to me, Wes. And so I was very disappointed this year. I did, however, have a great time, and I met a lot of publishers. I hung out with you and Johnny Thompson, who's Turbo Makes Games.
Johnny Turbo.
And it was a great time. I had Denny's at 2 a.m. one night with these guys from New Zealand. It was late, and luckily that was the only late. I didn't get COVID this year. Last year I got COVID. So I did most everything I wanted to do, except I didn't get to walk around the show floor that much. And so I really didn't see anything that is interesting, because I just didn't get to.
Well, you said you got to talk to some publishers. I got to talk to a bunch. I had to interview some. I'm sure you saw, but some of them showed me some interesting stuff too. Brian, I think was showing off this new UI system that they've put together, and they started announcing and releasing, which I thought was kind of interesting. I'm curious to see how that's going to integrate into game stuff. And Adam from Procedural Worlds was showing off this terrain system where he had a 900 kilometer area, all rendering, streaming, high speed, and looking really great. It was like a 30 by 30 kilometer area. I thought that was pretty interesting. I don't know if you got to see the previews of those, but they showed me some videos and they looked really cool. I think I told you this, but I didn't tell everybody else this. I got to meet the Proto Factor guy. He was there, and I found out he lives right down the street from me. I was like, oh, this is amazing. Small world. So I have to get together soon and start doing a meetup or something. I'm actually using his stuff in my game project, his and some of yours.
Yeah. They do actually. This is the Proto Factor Infinity PBR stuff do work pretty well together, which I appreciate, because they have a huge library. Or he has a huge library. It's
a crazy library of cool stuff, and it actually looks really good together. It's going to look better once I switch it over to URP and put a light in there. Right now, the lighting is 100% default, and my terrain is flat with me drawing 4 different textures. I was actually talking to some artists about level stuff earlier, though, so maybe I'll do something slightly prettier than programmer art.
I'm surprised you didn't go to the AI for basic textures, just to pop out 4 textures.
No need. I already have 1.5 million ground textures. Okay. It would take me more time to do that than it would to just search for my ground textures and go pick 4 of them and pop those in. Yeah. Way more work. Yeah. And it wouldn't look as good either, because I'm not an artist. I would come up with something shitty and just pick an ugly one instead of the ones they picked. I found the same for like icons too. I went to look at icons. I was like, oh, I can generate icons. I was like, what am I doing? Like, I have literally packs of 5,000 icons, and I have multiple of those. No problem finding an icon that I needed, and they look better.
Yeah, and you're not going to get the consistency AI yet, unless you build a node graph yourself or something. But that will take a long time.
And I'll save the actual, like, the super pretty work for an actual artist or designer. I just need something that looks good enough. Like, I need the Warcraft icons. Everybody's got the World of Warcraft icons. I can have those too. It'll be fine. Looks like we might have a Corvallis. So yeah, you didn't see anything else though super exciting?
Unfortunately, no. Okay. Not because there wasn't anything there.
Just because you didn't get a chance.
I didn't get to see. Yeah.
So there was there were a couple things that I saw that I thought might be interesting to developers. One was that Discord, I don't know if you heard about this, has a new game system that they're starting to promote, and they set up a game jam where they're taking ideas for games that are built and run in Discord. You basically build a WebGL game and it runs in Discord. They're doing grants for those games. I think he said like up to $50,000. And then by the end of the year, they're going to have a monetization system so that you can monetize those games inside Discord. It seemed like a really good opportunity because they've got a fucking captive market, right? Like they've got millions of users that are all game players sitting there that they can just pop stuff up to whenever the hell they want. So it seems like they've got a good opportunity there. And it might be a good time to kind of like break in somebody looking for a new market, something to get in on early. And they weren't just looking for games; they're also looking for interesting game-ish apps and game-related apps and stuff. So,
one of the kids in my friend's kids, like she's probably 11, I think, surprised me last summer. She was playing games on Discord. She's like, "Oh, I just play on Discord." I'm like, "What?
Yeah,
I didn't even know you could do that."
Yeah, they've got a couple on there now.
Yeah, and I had no idea that but if that's what the kids are doing, right, then I would say yes, do that too, because that's going to be what they want to do in the future. So get in early, devs.
Yeah, I feel like it's another one of those like early. It's an early market, but it's an early market that already has a shitload of users. It's not like an early market where they have to go sell a device and get people on. All they have to do is pop something up that is interesting enough.
I mean, that's part of the thing that always gets me. We're in this world where we're talking about the highest fidelity, the biggest resolutions, and then you see the kids and they grab their Switch, take it off the big screen TV, and just sit in the corner like this, playing on the small screen. They prefer that. And then you got other kids choosing to play Roblox with the crappiest graphics ever, no shadows, and they play that for hours and hours with their friends. And it's like, wait, why are we focusing on the highest, fidelity stuff when all the kids are gonna not give a crap about this?
Design trumps fidelity. And I heard grants and came as fast as I could. Unfortunately, my camera didn't follow me.
Yeah. Well, you should check it out. I'll send you the guy's info too. It looked interesting. They've got I think 6 different categories, and you can enter your game idea. It doesn't have to be a working game, and then they'll pick the ones that they want to fund. And I think he said it was up to $50,000 per project. I could be mixing that up with one of the other grant things that I heard, but
nice.
I think that was the number. So it sounded interesting. And then obviously the monetization afterwards sounded even more interesting. It sounded like there was opportunity to have good number of users, especially if you're early on. I feel like getting early in on any marketplace is always beneficial, especially if the marketplace is huge. What do you think in those story? You've done this quite a few times, like gotten in on new stuff.
I'm probably a bad candidate in this one simply because I'm to be cautious on the phrase. There's a term called enshittification that refers to platforms over time that slowly pivot their market from trying to provide value to the consumer and try to provide value to their shareholders, which is understandable and eventually happens. And let's just say Discord's original sales pitch, it's no longer doing what I wanted and now seems to be doing other things, which is fine, but I'd be cautious on the captive market audience simply because I have been using Discord for God knows how many years, and I have never once I have frustratedly closed that game tab every time it pops up of its own volition without asking me. And it's more and more buttons are showing shops and things for sale and more cruft I have to deal with. And so let's just say if a good competitor comes up anytime soon, it's a bit simpler, I might switch. So I don't know.
Yeah,
eventually, yeah, but
they've got a captive market that I feel like they've got too many users there. It's going to be difficult to compete. Yeah.
Yep, it's kind of like with current social media apps too. We would all love an alternative. Can anyone say they enjoy Twitter/X? But you're there because other people are there, and thus you kind of have that lock-in. Bonus points for server lock-in, where people unironically do business on Discord. Will it be for games and apps? Questionable, but there are definitely you have a very specific subsection of people who are power users for Discord, and they probably will be the heavy users of stuff like games and app services. To see where that goes.
Yeah, my son is a Discord programmer addict. Just like
I mean, you say that when it comes to power users, but I mean, if I say Control/ or Control K to the room here, I don't think anybody uses those keyboard shortcuts in Discord, but they're very important. I mean, I would mildly classify myself as a power user in that category, but
Jason, you're a powerful person, okay? You don't count.
But I do think it is definitely an audience thing. It depends on who you're engaging with, and there is streamer culture in younger generations. There is certainly people play games differently and do different stuff. So I'm not saying there won't be a market, but I do think if you do enter that area, you're going to have to target to the right people. You'll have to understand who your audience is and who plays those kinds of games. Because I notice every platform tries to copy each other's ideas. Like even things like Zoom have games you can now play in Zoom, and it's like cool. I don't think I have ever wanted to play a game in Zoom. Like I'll use Zoom for meetings, and I'll even use it for social meetup stuff sometimes. It just doesn't feel like it's commensurate with what I'm trying to do. Discord is more closer because it's used for people for everything from meetings to shitposting. So that if you pick the right audience, you might capture the right thing. But yeah, I think it would really require an analysis of the audience who plays those games, specifically age groups, categories, things they care about, etc.
Yeah, I think you would want to be an active Discord user too.
If I had to guess, games would probably fit best where you have a specific Discord community that's decently large. Statistically, one programmer uses it because so many programmers use Discord, and thus they make something kind of themed around that community, and thus that's something they engage in. Is my guess for like your best use case for if you wanted to.
Or a tool that lets them do stuff with that community somehow and theme it for each one. Yeah. Could be good. Or a game that ties in could be interesting. I was wrong on the amount though. Sorry, it's only 30,000. So never mind.
Not enough.
40 is my minimum. Okay.
Yeah. At least 41,000.
Yeah. No, it does look interesting though. I feel like it's one of those things that if you're looking for a new project or you got something not sure what to do with it, it could be interesting, especially if you're big on Discord. If you like doing Discord usage a lot, you don't like being full screen and giant, Jason. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, I thought that one was pretty interesting. What's up, Corvas?
Oh, just full screen but small icon because my camera still refuses to work. It was fine, literally 30 minutes ago.
It was fine earlier, yeah.
And sorry, mine was in the wrong aspect ratio and still isn't focusing right. So I wouldn't worry about it too much. Oh yeah. Other than that, at GDC, I saw lots of cool games, some interesting input stuff. I saw almost no crypto, which was not surprising. It was pretty much gone. I did see a lot of generative AI though, which I think was another interesting thing. There was lots of people working on faces, people working on bodies, multiple companies doing AI-based animation where you just say, hey, make this lizard man hit a tennis ball with a racket or whatever, and it just does it. And there's quite a few people working on AI model generation, including those guys that did the rodent one, which looked pretty interesting. They've got a new demo out. So I thought that the AI generation stuff was an interesting kind of theme there. None of it was really production ready, but it's all this promise of, this will be the next year stuff. But what did you see any of that, or did you hear anything about that stuff online?
I didn't.
I just saw Dave's video on it. It made me laugh. It's like, yep, a bit ropey.
Yeah. Well, he did one on the Unity one, right? Yeah. Well, it seems like. What about you, Corvallis? You've been watching this. Have you seen all the generative animation and model stuff lately?
To be honest, I've seen some of the model stuff, and I've had a little direct engagement with the animation stuff because I used Cascador for a project I finished recently. But for where it's at, it's really good to help you get started faster in a nice toy sense, where if you just want a model but you already know what you're doing for modeling, you can spin up a little prototype faster. Again, AI gray boxing is where a lot of it's at. And I'd say for even animation stuff, Cascador stuff is decently mature, where it's much more of an assistant, where it just helps you get from one frame to another and it cleans up your in-between somewhat. But there are definitely areas, even in a product, I'd say it's definitely polished like that, where it is being a bit too opinionated. So, for example, it has like an auto-physicsing feature where you can move a character and it then tries to guess every limb movement that logically follows along. And a lot of my animations, it just broke. I couldn't really use it for my specific use case, so we end up just using the normal rigging system. And it's decently intelligent curves. But yet again, there's one animation of my project that I'm really glad no one frame by frames, because if you do, you'll see the character's spine 180 degrees for about 2 frames and then snaps back because the interpolation could not figure out how to twist that properly. Let alone, too, for whatever AI app you're using, there's always some level of friction taking content from one program and putting it in a new ecosystem. No matter how seamless the pipeline may be, there is a friction there. So like Cascador to Blender to a game engine is 3 different hops and 3 different potential sources of things going wrong. If you want your most ideal AI tool, it should be some kind of integration into software you're already using, because the AI tool is already likely to make a mistake. Exporting it adds layers of potential mistake and cleanup.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm excited about it because I hate doing animation. And my default is to go to Mixamo. So this is like a nice step up, and every now and then I have to reach out to an actual animator, but most of the time I really, really try to avoid it if I don't have to. And for me,
hard.
What's up, Andrew?
Animation's hard. It's a hard task.
I've always found that like I just don't have enough animation work to justify an animator full time on most small scale projects. There's just not enough stuff, but you need a little bit of stuff, which makes it really difficult.
Like you just need a slight tweak to this walk or a grab for like this particular thing for the purpose. A lot of my stuff I have to kind of custom bootleg, so I definitely get it. Something that could just very quickly whip up a base that you can then edit is again where I really like where AI can be. Is for me, I can animate. I wouldn't say I'm good enough to be a dedicated animator, but I can fuck with something that exists. So give me something basic, I can then tinker to my use case.
Yeah, my problem is just patience. Animations to do it properly with the whole various animation rules. Sure, I can have some base keyframes. I can even nudge some stuff, but once you start looking at shifting feet and how wrists rotate to get things to feel right with weight and composition of things, it's so much tweaking. I'm bad at it. I watch videos at 3.5x speed. Like that's how little patience I have in like normal day to day. And if you're sitting there having to go, okay, this 15-second frame, I have to make sure that at every point the weight of the carry through from the kinetic, it's just I can't do it. I've so many times I've tried, and I know it needs to be done. Like I'll find tons and tons of reference material, and I'll frame by frame it, and I'll watch stuff, and I'll watch the follow through with animation, and I'll try to do it, and I always end up going, that's enough, and leaving with stuff that's terrible because I just don't have the patience for the amount of work required to really do it properly.
Yeah, it's a whole skill investment. That's why I say I do it like as a tertiary thing, but to do it properly, you're spending coder levels of time, system design, and knowledge into it. It's always a trade-off for how much am I willing to invest in it. You could probably get it done to a high quality, but that triangle of time, quality, and cost. How much time am I willing to invest to get like a certain quality level versus I just pay someone?
Yeah.
I think Jim just shared this Meshcapade. Apparently Games from Scratch did a video about it. I've not seen this one. It looks pretty interesting though.
Meshcapade. Is it like AI generating both the mesh and the animations?
Motion from text, motion from video, body shape from images. That's the 3 things.
Yeah.
I haven't watched the Game from Scratch thing, of course. My experience in like mocap, from what I've heard, is a lot of animators will be like, "Oh, I could do mocap, but it takes longer because I have to clean it up so much. That's faster just to make it myself."
If you're a good animator, probably.
Yeah.
There is a truth for that because again, not best animator, but taking a mocap and cleaning it for me is about the effort of what I'm willing to do for an animation, because making it from scratch is hard for me. But also, depending on what you want to do, mocap may or may not just even be able to encapsulate it, because you might want something.
Most of the time, my friends will say they'll use the animators I know. They'll use the motion capture purely as a reference frame. They won't actually use the raw material. And often it comes down to as well the type of motion capture you get, because like the actual motion capture is relatively complex, not only just from you can get something which superficially looks really good. Like there's so many cheap suits now. You can buy a motion capture suit for about 8,000, which will be more than good enough for everything you'd ever really need, because it's just IMU sensors in like an array that then uses sensor fusion to calculate stuff, and it's good enough to like record and get something. You can even get cheap ones for 700 or 800, but like the point is, even if you get your full perfect recording, the problem you have is you always need something like external sensors to get your kinetic, your kind of kinematic stuff, right? Because even if you have a perfect match motion, if someone jumps, you can't detect because all sensors jumped, right? There's no where was the floor? How do you know they actually jumped, right? So you end up with it just looks like a pose change. So good sensor stuff has external cameras plus the sensor suit plus all the other stuff. And so the point is, even if you have even if you don't get sensor drift, which you will, because every single sensor will have drift, even if you can aggregate the sensor drift and average it out, it looks fine. You'll always get some weird behavior, specifically around things like jumping or feet positions or whatever. And then even if you have all of that correct, you're probably not wasting your time with hand sensors, because the glove technology is actually often different. It's a whole different thing that you do as a second layer. Same with like face stuff. It ends up being a lot of like 2 or 3 different systems working together to build something, when on balance, 90% of stuff can be just, done especially for like large motions. Obviously, facial capture is usually still done with the actual capture because it's much harder to do that practically. But body language and stuff, it's almost always easier to, specifically in small cases, to do like hand gestures, talking, picking things up. It's just faster and easier for most people.
A point in motion capture's favor, but it is contingent on the user, is for stuff like character acting, adding flavor to a walk. If you know people who can do the physical acting part of fleshing that out, it can save you that, because for a normal animation, you might not know initially the full flavor of the walk cycle you want. But if you have someone who can do that and they know that intention, you get it decently quickly. And at worst, you still just generated really, really good reference for exactly what you want. So definitely in the favor of, if you can do it, just with the capacity that you have. If you know someone who can do that, it just requires like the physical desire to act that out and capacity to do so convincingly. But I've seen some crazy physical actors that blew me away.
Plus the other part of it too is, like, again, without going into super weeds on this, there's so much technical information. I have a friend of mine who's a pencil drawer for characters and portraits, and the amount of information they know about, different bone lengths and distances, and that they know that the spine rotates at 3 different points and the rotations are at different degrees and there's only a certain amount. And so you can tell when someone's maximally rotated and how, like, all of this stuff that I don't know, but they need to kind of get this stuff right. With a walk cycle, for example, you won't notice it consciously, but I guarantee if you took a mo-capped child walk versus an adult walk and applied that to a character, you can tell the difference, because there's a certain body language difference to do with like everyone has these different things, but there's like a whole concept of feet pronation and how much foot heel toe to the ground you have, and whether you slide your feet or whether you don't slide your feet, the inner gait of the how your thighs sit. So there's like so many of these little differences between men and women, between children and adults, between people of different weights and size, like so much stuff that if you're applying the wrong walk cycle to the wrong character, it'll feel off. And it can be very interesting. But again, the difference is if you get it right, there's something intuitively really accurate that you can tell is just infinitely better than the alternative. So yeah, there's a reason why even when people are doing prop animations for motion capture, they'll still hold props, because you need that sense of body weight and motion to match the appropriate stuff.
Absolutely. And hey, if you have good hand sensors, God, it saves you time on hands. So many fingers, so many joints, so many places where that can go wrong.
Yep. That's why people don't show hands in the games. Here, let me give you this. Cut to the face.
Appears in my hand. Perfect.
I will say though, like, the one good thing about hand stuff is you can often do blends, which is quite nice. Like, a lot of the time you don't need each individual pose. Like, I know someone who's working on a project where they're trying to do a animated piano player, and they're talking to a real piano player for how do you actually play them, and for these particular notes and scales, and where would your hand rest in these positions. And you can actually approximate a lot of it by doing transitional poses and phase. And it's like, because there is human flourishes you won't get right, but you can get 70% of the way there. And I think back to games which have things where characters would hold objects. There's actually a few assets on the asset store which you can show a capsule, and then when you place an object in the hand, if you rotate the hand, it'll just find, using raycasting, it'll find points to place the fingers that will have a semi-accurate holding pose for that object. So there's lots of ways to do it, but oftentimes in most cases you can literally get away with grabbing a small object, grabbing a large object, having various points. You can get away with a lot of basics, And
if you go fast enough, no one will notice.
True. There are several points in your animation that may look very bad because you have the god's eye view and you can see where it breaks. If the user doesn't see it, it might be good enough. Professionally clean these up. For your use case, you just need an animation. Good enough is good enough.
Yeah. Do your third person view to cut off the feet. And then you don't need to worry about feet sliding.
Hell, even like Pixar, for example, has the classic scene with like Woody and Buzz standing next to each other. Woody's feet are clipping through the floor, but it makes for a better shot. Hide it, cheat the shot.
Yeah, it really is one of those, like, it is worth knowing what's worth the energy. Like it's one of those things, like, if you ever actually think about it, this goes back to I've said before about doing magic and magic tricks and stuff. One of the most fun things about doing magic tricks is if you do a trick for somebody, there's a couple of things you can do called priming, where you will set up a set of rules in advance that describe a scenario. And then when you're done, people will rewrite the story and as they tell it to others. Without going into a whole lot of nitty-gritty details, one example is there's like one trick out of a set of 20 might require the deck to be in a shuffled order. And so you might at some stage do a swap to a deck that's fully shuffled in a certain way. And then you would, middle of your trick talking, you'd do a false shuffle and you'd hand them the deck. And you'd say halfway through, when the trick is past the point that it matters, and tell them to shuffle again. My point is, halfway through a trick with a shuffled deck, you would say, shuffle the deck again. And when they tell that story to somebody else, I've been at the bar watching someone tell someone else about a trick I did, and they will tell the story like, first I shuffled the deck, then they did the trick, then they handed it back, and I shuffled again. And so their version of events has changed because you primed them to do so. And so my point with the animation stuff is, if you go back and play a lot of games and ask yourself which games have animations for picking things up, you'll actually get it wrong a lot of the time. If you watch the games, a lot of games will do, at best, vague hand gesture towards thing, and then it appears in inventory, because at the moment your hand reaches out, the icon pops up, and if someone's done the UI job right, your eye will move from hand to pop up, and you won't even be really processing the finalization of the grabbing of the object or a handover.
You hear a sound instead.
So
flash of light.
Exactly. So it comes down to, like, where should that energy go? And oftentimes the answer is, like, this stuff, you don't need shrinking horse testicles in your game. Let's put it that way, right? Like, it's not a priority for most
feature.
Maybe not in your game.
Yeah. Every game does need those, but I think the big takeaway here for everybody is you can't trust your memory.
Just make a horse testicle simulator game. It'd probably be like #1 on Steam, knowing the way things go. Put it up on, submit it for Discord.
It would be. Now that's my submission. All right.
No, it would.
You'll get 30K just to develop it.
The most realistic hydraulics. Okay. But yeah, cheating. Your brain will do a lot of gap work. For instance, when you watch something with subtitles, you don't remember the original language it was in because you don't know the language. You're going to subconsciously remember that scene in the tone of voice with whatever words you were reading. You don't remember. Yes,
somebody watches a lot of anime.
Yes, my meme card out in front, and hey, that's how you know you can cheat heavily.
I mean, you're basically using the player's brain as an external GPU, right? To process stuff that isn't there. If you give them the 2 keyframes, they're going to fill in the blanks with their own brain. I mean, that's what our brains do all the time with our own inputs. So we're primed to fill in the blanks with new memories, essentially fake memories. Everything's fake.
Exactly. It's all a matter of your perception. Offload some of that memory to the user. Don't cause them to Stack Overflow, though. That's the willing suspension of disbelief being brought.
Oh yeah. That's why we have special hospitals.
Can I add more GPU to my user? Okay, because I'm feeling a little lazy today. I need to do some processing.
Elon Musk is working on that with his chimp test, right?
Hey, it was in a human. We got humans with Starlinks now.
But you don't have one yet, Andrew?
Oh, I would never get one from his companies. Trust me.
Oh no, let me just take you on a little trip.
That sounds extremely dangerous.
No, it sounds. I tend to agree. So, you guys ready to get on to tips?
Well, we've been talking about the testicles, so let's just do the tips.
Yeah,
right.
just the tips this time.
Let's move on. So we're gonna get back to doing a little tip of the week. I've got something. I don't know if you guys all have something.
Get ready.
Just something useful that all the developers can take with them going forward. So, Corvallis, I gave you almost zero warning. So, do you want to go first or last?
Hell, let's go first. I love diving right in.
Right.
Tip of the week. For animation, learn what a control rig is. And remember, these do not translate between your programs. If you are doing a 3D animation, by all means, use something that easily lets you be able to retarget these animations as well. It'll save you a lot of pain. It'll save you a lot of cleanup. Do so. And when you translate them to a game engine, it should work. Should being the big asterisk there. If you do a good job with your cleanup and you're set up in like Blender, it should work just fine in other areas. So don't be afraid of I can't speak. Don't be afraid of Blender. Be knowledgeable. Take your knowledge to your own hands and learn what a control rig is. Do not.
Can you give like the elevator pitch for what a control rig is?
Sure. So
that way they've got an idea of what they're going to look up.
Yeah, when you move your arm, your forearm doesn't just move. It moves with the rest of your body. Your shoulder moves back, your hand moves back, etc. A computer doesn't know this by default. When you move your forearm bone, only that bone moves. Maybe something attached to it, but nothing before it. A control rig is meant to mimic more human motion. So you have things related to FK and IK, forward and inverse kinematics. Not going to dive into it, but these will save you a lot of time animating. So that way you're not moving things bone by bone. You can instead move a hand and get a very realistic human movement. And with that, you can make an animation quicker, and you should be able to retarget an animation. So just transfer it over to another humanoid. Humanoids are generally pretty predictable. So working with that allows you to keep your animations effective across multiple different meshes and rigs.
Nice. Where would you recommend people go to learn a little bit more and try to figure that stuff out? They want to get in and become better at the animating. Are there any like resources you'd send them to? Does Blender have docs or somebody else?
Blender themselves have a healthy amount of docs. Personally, I'm very ghetto with how I learn. I bootstrap everything from a collection of YouTube videos for, oh, hey, this works. So this would have been a pitch I could have given 2 weeks ago, but I can't quite do now, was Cascador was really great at this, and still is, where if I just pop in like a humanoid model, they have an auto rigger built in where you don't really need to think much. It'll just set it up so that way you have both FK and IK movement. But recently, their free plan has changed where you can't export back out for free. So it kind of makes the point moot of you can't get your model back out with the completed animation like an FBX format. Now,
does that include the new thing that they just did where they released that like free 1 or 2 year plan for students?
Oh, it's for students as well. Okay, then yeah, if you're a student, by all means do this. But yeah, it's part of that plan restructuring. If you make an account with them before March, you can get like 2 years of their normal plan for free. So you can still use it as you
okay.
But yeah, if other than that, definitely search on YouTube. There are plenty of programs that you can invest in. I believe AutoRig Pro is like a paid one for Blender. That's very easy for you to set up auto rigs. I found it's a retargeter, very good as well. There are also free ones like Rigify. So things that are meant to help you set up a rig in Blender and give you that control rig power. That's free, totally usable as well. And of course, third-party plugins that do something similar or something more specific for your use case. By all means, look into these, but just remember, the control rig is for you to set up animations. It will not work once it leaves whatever program you set it up in. So these bones do nothing but like transfer to Unity. They only care about the underlying deformation bones in their movement. So animate on control rigs, transfer them away, and shuffle them away elsewhere.
Okay, that sounds interesting. So if you can send me those links too to some of those tools that you mentioned other than Cascador, I've got that one. I'd love to put those in the description. I think that would be helpful for people. And Andrew, it looks like you've got something already ready to share and show.
So this is what I've learned this week. I've learned some things this week. And so I was going to, so when you said, let's do tips, I'm like, yes, I got it. So I'm working on this whole projectile system. And as many of you know, I like making very pretty inspectors that make it easier to manage data. So one of the things I learned today, if I go to this spawn modification, well, this isn't actually, I didn't just learn this, but this this is an editor script. I'm going to go into Writer and we'll show the spawn modification editor. It's an object called spawn modification, and I should have brought this one up. I didn't bring this one up. And I wanted to have the link to the docs here at the top and a little bit more information, but I didn't want to make a full custom editor because sometimes that's overkill. And so, and in this case, there's just too many versions. There's no way I'm going to do that. And so you can make a custom editor that only has one additional thing, like just the link to your docs or just the link to a reminder or something else, simply by doing an editor. So you're going to do a custom editor, ask the AI how to do it or Google it. For, in this case, it's a custom editor for the spawn behavior modification. Is this the size? Yeah, it looks like it's a good size. And then on your inspector GUI, you just do all this regular stuff all the cool custom stuff that you want to do, and then just draw a default inspector, which is really, well, I mean, I've got my own helper scripts, so it's a little bit more complicated, but it's eventually just say, draw a default inspector somewhere in here. Yeah, where is it? Wait a minute. Why is it so complicated? It's extra complicated because I've made it.
You've got a property field for it. The other thing you can do is call like the base on inspector GUI.
Yeah.
We'll also do that.
Yeah. Ask the AI for the simple version. I'm doing a lot more because I'm also saving things and doing other things. But you can do a very simple bonus inspector and then add new stuff. That was one thing I learned. But I learned two things that go in well together that were brand new to me this week. So when I go to these to this inspector for this projectile object, there's a lot going on here. There's these behaviors, modifications, all these different behaviors, and each behavior has different options. They do different things. They make the projectile work in different ways. And the way this works is that each one of these is a scriptable object. So there's all these different scriptable objects, and each one will have slightly different settings. So you can have a setting that makes it go to the right, one that goes to the left, one that goes up, and all these different things for your different projectiles. So I wanted to be able to see the values in my inspector and change them without having to go to each individual object. Because if you're like me, you hate having to switch inspector views back and forth and then forget which one you were on and have to go search for it. Very big headache. So I learned that you can create custom attributes. Now I knew you could create custom attributes, but I had never done it before. So that's the first thing I learned. And if I look at my spawn behavior class here, you can see that in addition to the tooltips, which I always use, in addition to the min values and the ranges that you should be using for reasonable inputs so that people don't mess up and do something crazy, I have this new show in projectile editor attribute with even a field label that gives me what the text will show. And all this is this one little script here. It's a new class for that. It's a system attribute. We have our string here. And when we call that attribute, we just have this little bit of text. And then the editor does the rest. And I'll show that in a second. What's interesting about this is the surface. I've scratched a little bit on the surface. I am sure there's a hell of a lot more I could do with this if I had my wits about me, right? But the implementation of this is quite simple. You just put that there above the thing. And actually, the actual thing I was going to show is the spawn the modification editor. No, not that one. So, but anyways, we use it here, and then it pops out, and now I've got my little drop down here that shows all these values. The tooltips are shown right here. If there's a tooltip attribute, then I can show that. It's another editor script. The headers get shown here as well. And the string I used in the code is this value right here. So now I can control the string and make it as human readable as I want. And so if the property is named something that's not quite what I want it to be when displayed here, I can control that. The interesting thing is when I change things here, it actually changes it on the scriptable object. So that's a good and bad thing. But when you and I've got these links to go back and forth too, because I don't like having to find objects. But that way, if you do change something here, it changes it on all the objects, because if you're not actually changing the the bullet blue here, you're actually changing the bullet blue impact, or the bullet impact blue. Yeah. So attributes is the main takeaway here. They're interesting. They're probably way more powerful than I'm showcasing here. And I suspect in my future, there will be many more attributes.
This is why I tell everybody to use Odin, because it's what you've built here is one of the attributes in there. The
really?
inline editor, or inline inspector or editor, one of those two. Yeah, gives you exactly that functionality. It's very, very handy, and I use it all the time. So you definitely found a useful thing to recreate for sure. I mean, obviously you can't just ship Odin with your stuff, so it makes sense in here, but that's super useful.
I was telling you the other day, I've never used Odin. I've owned Odin for a very long time. I've never actually used it because I can't, unfortunately. Maybe one day.
I use it in everything, so
I know
it's interesting. Well, I was going to go over to story next, but my my thing is very similar, very related to yours. So I think maybe I'll show that first real quick.
Go for
it. The line, Jason, but we accept it.
Let me pull it up here. So there we go. Is it showing?
It is.
There it
okay. It is showing. Right. Yes.
For a while it was blurry.
Yeah, I've been working on the on this game, and I've been doing a lot of debugging. So I'll show you real quick what it looks like now. Here's the ladybug. You can run around and go kick other ladybugs. You can turn into a mimic and give them a lick, or you can oh, whoops! I killed her. Let's go find another ladybug. What have I done?
Well, you did say you were debugging, and I saw a bug in your game.
So there was a bug there. Now, what I've got here, and that's actually perfect, what I wanted to show is when I'm debugging these things, one of the little tricks that I like to use is to add a custom inspector. So I've got that that player here, right here, this player. No, where's he at? Where's my character? Ooh. Is my character destroyed? Let's see. Okay, well, normally I've got my character and I go select them and then I look at the data for them. But what I was going to show you is the way that I usually go about doing that is I'll add a little inspector for the object that's very similar to what you have that shows all of the data right at the top. So here I can see the current state that any one of my creatures are in. If my player hadn't destroyed itself, I'd be able to see that too. I know why it destroyed itself. I just changed something with the interaction stuff. But I can see the roles that it's got, the abilities that it has, the cooldowns, all of the stats and stuff without having to click around or do anything special. It only shows up in the editor. It's editor-only code, and it works with a very simple let me switch the share real quick. A very simple script that I spend zero effort on, but helps me debug immensely. And that looks like this. So like I said, yours reminded me a lot of what I was doing. So there's an editor inspector for a type, and then it has the on inspector GUI. And then in here, you just go through and add in a little label for all of the different data that I care about. And then at the end, there's the base on inspector GUI right here, which makes it do the normal inspector. So right at the top, I can see all of the debug data that I want for any character. Go click on them. It gets compiled out at like build time, so I don't have to worry about any performance issues there or even ripping it out. It's just there all the time. I can go click on the NPCs, see all of their data, and it's very simple to add stuff. If I want to go add any extra info, and I just go add basically a little label field entry here. Makes it, like I said, super fast for debugging and stops me from having to do as much attaching breakpoints and trying to figure stuff out if I don't know the state of things, especially when there are lots of things where the state is moving constantly. Another trick that I like to use with that too is so on things where I'm trying to figure out why it's making a decision or what's going on, a lot of the time I'll do a simple setup like this where I give the thing a message field that I can fill in with info if I want. And then what I'll usually do is like at release time, you can just rip that out because it's just a couple of useless allocations. But before that, even at release time, you could change it over to be some constants or something. But the way that works is, if you look here, if I go find some of the usages, here's the brain trying to figure out what it's got for a target, why it's making decisions, and it'll just give a little update there, and I can see that inside the inspector, see exactly what's going on. Again, mostly just for super fast iteration debugging and speeding things up, so that I know why all my things are doing what they're doing, and it's almost a zero effort thing. You just go create a custom editor, override the onInspector GUI, add whatever data you want, and then call onInspector GUI at the end. And then I just do that on that kind of top level object for the thing I care about. And I can rip it out, add it. It takes me a good 30 seconds to add one. So that was just something that I realized that I do a lot and people probably don't know about. People probably go, like, hey, if you're going and looking at debug properties and right clicking the, show properties and then going into debug mode and trying to find all that stuff, much easier if you just spam it out there. And it's also a lot easier than putting it into console logs where you're trying to figure out what's going on with things. Console logs are great for like one-off events, but not so much for data tracking.
Much more efficient logging. That way you don't need to actually use the console. Just look at the object.
Yeah. that's the goal, at least. But yeah, that was my little tip there. Hopefully it's useful for people. I'm able to use that in your own stuff. Also for the students, let me find that little link here. Putting the code up today for that project. So if you want to go see the actual code, I put it up for the multiplayer mastery course students before there's a previous version, and I put up the new version of the code. So you'd be able to see that and strip that out, or all of the other code side stuff. The assets obviously can't put in there, but it would be nice if I just owned everything and could just ship the assets too. But Andrew, are you frozen? No, you're animating behind. No, it's great because I was like, is Andrew frozen? No, he's staring because his light is changing.
Oh, yeah, that's true. I can't pretend.
Yeah, so it moves in the background. But yeah, that was my tip. Hopefully it's helpful for people. I've got a lot more from this project coming up for the next couple weeks. So Story, I'm excited. This is going to be a good one, right? Life-changing.
Play on brand. Well, seeing as you're talking about editor tooling, I might as well join in. The first one is actually something I found, because I was actually trying to figure it out and I couldn't find a good solution, which is if you use, Andrew was talking about the properties, custom properties and property attributes. One thing you'll find if you apply a property attribute to an array is the attribute will apply to every child element of the array. So if I make a property drawer and it's meant to change a certain element, let's say a string makes it read-only or something, and I apply it, it'll apply to every child element in the array, which is cool. That's like a pretty quick automatic feature, but you can't modify the entire collection. If you wanted to like paint every element in the array red or something, you couldn't modify the collection, or in my case, make it a paginated, the actual array itself or something. Or at least that's what I thought. There's actually a constructor override called apply to multiple or something. Apply to collection. And so basically, if you extend the default property attribute and pass in a Boolean flag, you can basically modify how the actual array itself draws, which can be quite useful if you're doing, in my case, an array of textures. I was turning it into a grid, so it was a bit nicer to draw. That's one. And the other one I think I just learned today actually is, I know you make good use of these, Andrew, is the scroll view that lets you like have a region that you basically begin and end and have a scrollable section of your own stuff. What I didn't realize is actually there's an overload of that function, which takes in two rects. One rect represents the actual drawn region that's like locked. And the second rect is the content size region, which acts the same way as a content size fitter. What that means is you can take in an array of objects that you're about to render in a scroll rect. You can calculate the max height by multiplying per item size by total, and then generate a secondary rect inside of it, draw that, and then only draw the child elements, and then capture the index for the scroll and index into the appropriate array. Long story short, you can actually create a scroll region of thousands of items, but actually only show 11 at a time and do the same level of pooling as you would do with anything else, which not even Unity does, because if you have an array of 1,000 elements, Unity will start to chug very quickly. So you can actually avoid that problem yourself by just creating your own scroll rects that are, auto pooling 14 items or 12 items or something. So I only learned that today because I normally what I do is I make a paginator. I literally only draw a certain set, use the skip and take functions in Link to just grab a page size. But then you have to manage pages and have page buttons and stuff. And it's just easier to say, hey, actually, we can have a collection that is all of the items, thousands and thousands, and, do that. Because I was doing some tests last week on large data sets. And to probably no one's surprise, if you try to read a file that's a billion lines long, you'll run out of system memory. So that doesn't work. So I was trying to.
Well, don't do that.
Yeah, I learned that. Yeah, no, yeah, I knew that. I wanted to see where would the cap be and what would happen on my machine, and I started looking at different solutions and how I might handle mapped page files and indexing into files. Which, by the way, that's a whole other topic I could cover if we're talking about tips. Say JSON files. One thing that people often do is if they have a collection of items like pickups in your game, they'll just use a normal JSON file. JSON files are fine, but what you don't have is random access. If you wanted to just load item 15 and it's item 15 in the file, you have to read the whole file into memory to get item 15, which is fine if you've got 200 items. If you've got 10,000, or in this case, 1 billion items in a file, I literally can't even read to an item without having to do something with all the memory. And so you have to basically iterate through. And by the way, when I say a billion items, I have 128 gig of RAM. I've got a relatively decent chunking machine.
It should be in a binary format, though, if you're going to force that much data. You should avoid JSON.
Yes, you can. But the kind of a stopgap solution, if you're not familiar with kind of going into that whole make your own formats, BSON is what I actually use for those. But is you can use what's called JSON lines, which basically means if your JSON format is actually lists of items, there's no reason to make an object which is like a hierarchical structure, which requires you to read the hierarchical structure. If you just write each line as a JSON object in its entirety, then you can just say read line 7, and suddenly you can just jump straight to line 7, read that line in. So in the case where I find myself storing a list of items exclusively into a JSON file, I won't make a JSON object with an array. I will literally just write JSON lines one by one into the thing, and that way I can have it, and I order them first. So you order them, store them, and that way you can basically do things like lookups and searches without having to store the whole lot in memory. And you can get one step further by doing something called, again, memory mapped files or similar, which basically let you directly map a space in memory to a file and then index into it, and then you can start a parallel thread because each one is a separate line now, and you can run through all of the lines in parallel till you find what you want, add it to a concurrency bag, and then grab the results out of that, and that's vastly faster than you'd get out of individual runs. Kind of.
The ideal is still just load the whole thing in memory if you can.
Well, yeah. If you can,
for 9 out of 10 problems, you just want to throw the whole thing in RAM because there's not enough data there to matter. But but it's just it's more about knowing what's happening in the context of doing knowing that it's there. Now, you called out color things real quick. I noticed that Color Studio is the free asset of the week on Publishers thing. Is this one you tried?
I don't think I've tried that.
It's by Connect, and I know everybody likes Connect. But it's one of those tools for managing colors. Is that? I was curious what your thoughts were on that whole thing, because you've talked about it a little bit, and talking about setting up the color schemes with the tooling. Are there other tools that you've used for setting that up, or what's? I'm just kind of curious. Is if you want to do a good color scheme, is this something you would do, or you do something totally different? I guess you go grab it and try it out. It's free right now. If everybody watching, just click the link, go grab it for free. Use the code on there.
I already own it, so apparently I have picked it up at some point.
Me too.
Yeah. So color is interesting. Yes, it looks like a good asset, and it certainly seems like it's covered all the stuff that you'd want from something like this. It has.
Is it worth it at the price of free though?
I think it's pretty clear. It's free. I would say though that the concepts behind this, it's like all of this stuff, right? It comes down to the question of would you need an asset for it? What are you doing it with, or whatever, or how many features would you use out of it? At the end of the day, all these color assets boil down to there's like 6 different ways to represent color, whether you're doing RGB or hue, saturation, and lightness, or whichever, or YMC. It depends on, are you doing it for print, are you doing it for screen, various different things, which all come down to like how it renders and different stuff. But most of these are kind of color rules to make things look better. If you struggle with that stuff, something like this can be quite good, because you can grab a base color and then say, make me a split complementary, and it'll automatically pick 2 colors on the opposing side of the wheel for you that match roughly together, and then has all the other nice rules for it. A lot of these, though, are really sort of, it's literally a circle, and it's like there's set equations that'll grab something on the appropriate side. So all of these can be one-line equations. So if you are writing like an automator for yourself, you can often just like, I have my own script somewhere with like a couple of lines of code which do 90% of what I want, which will like, convert a color to hue, saturation, and lightness, and then do a saturation divider across multiple things to get like a gradiated portion, and then save out each of these things I use frequently enough that I have little helper functions for already. But yeah, I do think it's a useful thing to have, and it's not that difficult either. Like each of these are. And you don't even need to memorize them either. Like a lot of these, if you don't even want to use specific assets, there's a million websites. I have like at least 10 that I use semi-regularly between Adobe Color and there's things like Low Spec and Color Lover and various other websites that all have a color hunt. And each of these websites will have different palettes organized by moods or eras, or certain ones, certain games, or pixel art, or yeah, color is a big topic. I could literally talk about color for a very long time.
Yeah, we should do like a full show about it sometime. Get a pal in here too. It's more artistic people. So let's see, Andrew.
Oh yes,
you've got something you've been working on, and I think would be interesting to share. You want to tell everybody what it is, real quick?
Yeah. So I've been working on this projectile system. My thing was I needed arrows for my game, so I also figured I would need other things for my game. Suddenly, because I'm doing a demo, the camera's flying away, and that's actually because I used a prefab, and then I saved the prefab in another scene. So let me just turn that off. That wasn't supposed to happen, but it's the obligatory demo. That's not the worst thing. So I wanted a projectile system, but projectiles are kind of annoyingly hard in the end, because I wanted one that's flexible, one that I can control, one that I knew I had no idea what I'm going to want in the future. And I wanted to use a lot of stuff from the asset store, because the particles on the asset store are amazing. So I made this projectile system that essentially allows a spawner to have all these different projectiles. And as I was showing earlier, you set these up in the inspector, and they're all behavior based. Meaning, like this bullet blue right now looks like this. It's really cool.
Good juice, good feedback.
Yeah.
Huh?
And that's really neat. But the cool thing about it is I can go to the spawn behavior. Right now we're using this machine gun fast. We can switch this to the machine gun 3 shots fast. And now when we press play, well, it's too fast, but it's spitting out 3 shots at once. Actually, I should show a better one. There's 5 at 45 degrees. Here we go. This one is much more visual.
If you're swapping out to do demos, I'd turn off the the recompile code base, because you can then just quickly test these as you're without having to rewrite the thing.
You have to show me what that is. But here we go. Now we got 5 going out.
Nice.
And it's a different speed. And this is just controlled by this machine gun thing right here. And all you have to do is change the angle here. And I don't know if this works. It does work at runtime. So
it should.
Yeah. So now you can change the angle and adjust that. You can do 10, and then now it's spitting out 10. You can do all sorts of different things. And the cool thing is that you can code your own too. So you can use these ones that are
what would make for a really good example?
Yeah.
You could add a script that basically sine waves that number between 2 values over time, and you'd get like a nice cascading wave of your bullets.
There you go. See?
It's literally the 1 line of code. It's mathf.sine, and you'd multiply it by your min max, and you get like a sinusoidal wave of bullets, which would be pretty cool.
So that you can do a lot of different things. And so I've been making all these particles, and I've been updating it to work with all sorts of There's a laser beams too. Though that one wasn't really working. With all these particles from these particle packs, because they're just really fun and they look prettier than my dev ones.
Yes, they do.
They do. And and you can add all these behaviors. So this one has a behavior. This is one of my favorite ones, where it just shoots out, then it goes looking for a target, and when it hits the target, it spawns this other thing, and this other thing has forces on it, so it kind of like holds things into a force field. And all of this is just done with behaviors. And so these behaviors, you can mix and match them between different projectiles. You can replace them very easily. They all do basically one thing. There's a ray cast hit detector, an impact, move forward, because you gotta move, right? Destroy on trigger. There's just a lot you can do with it, and it's very easy to kind of build projectiles. So that's what I've been working on, and I've been making this is using the projectiles from Arcanor Sci-Fi Effects or Sci-Fi Arsenal. But I've been doing integrations for all sorts of things. So this is the cartoon effects remastered, and the camera might end up moving too on this one. So this again, just different projectiles, same concept but with different particles essentially, and it works with any particle system in the end. But what I found in doing this is, publishers set up their particles very differently. So there's a couple that took me a long time to convert over. Forge 3D Sci-Fi Effects is amazing particles. They look great. They sound great. They've got these amazing turrets that are just perfect for so many games. But it took me 4 hours to convert these over.
Ooh.
Because
I remember those ones having a lot of scripts.
A lot of scripts. They had the names of the particles in the scripts.
Yeah.
So you could not use them without converting them, essentially, or building the particles from scratch, which was a shame. So I ended up building the particles from scratch. I redid a lot of code, but now we've got these cool particles that do cool things, and they sound cool, they look cool, they're powerful, and I'm going to use these in my games.
It looks great, man.
Awesome.
I'm jealous of your visuals.
A lot of it's just post-processing for the visuals and all that, but I just think it's really fun that like this is another great example. These are the same projectile. This one does just back and forth, no big deal, and then this one has a behavior that shoots them out at a different rate, and also they're got a little chaos in the trajectory, so it randomizes the trajectory a little bit. So you could just change one behavior and change everything. So that's it. That's my show.
Nice. Awesome. And where can everybody check that thing out and grab it?
You can check it out on the Asset Store when it comes out. It's not out yet. I'm still finalizing it. I'm working on the documentation because I like making really nice docs. I passed it to Wyman the other day, and he said, "Don't tell me anything about it. Let me just give you all my complaints." So I'm waiting for his novella to come back.
Yes, I've got a few.
Nice.
Yes.
So I'm basically dog fooding it a little bit first, making the documentation, fixing any bugs, doing refactors. I'll listen to what Jason has to say, and maybe I'll do a few things based on that. And then I'll release it on the Asset Store, and it will be part of my game as well because I wanted to shoot arrows, and then I realized I also was going to want fireballs, and also probably lasers from the flying eyes, and probably all sorts of other things I don't know I want yet. And so I figured, let me build a flexible behavior-based projectile system.
I guess a question I have is, how difficult was it to hook up particles from entirely different systems? So I know you mentioned Forge was by far the hardest, but how on average, how difficult would you say a new particle hookup is?
I would say the Arcanor ones are a dream to work with because they're literally set up. There's a flying eye. They're literally set up.
I had to show it
as a muzzle, a particle, a projectile itself, and the impact. So there's 3 different things. And that's the dream because you just have 3 different behaviors and you're done. And they already have movement on them. If you want, you can not use them, or you can. It doesn't matter.
They'll work. I assume work fine if you move them around. The trails look good and it works, right?
Everything, everything. It's very much more easy to set up. Yeah. The most difficult ones were that Forge 3D one because the scripts you just had to either figure it out yourself with the base components, which weren't the best organized, or convert their scripts, which took me about 5 hours to do. And the other one, which kind of annoyed me because I've always looked at it and loved it, is the Realistic Effects Pack 4.
I was going to ask you that one because that's an interesting case where, as an end user, they're really good because they're very drag and drop prefabs. But for what you're trying to do, each one is an isolated prefab, which means you would have to, So I was actually picturing that one in particular as you were saying it. I was like,
switch
that
back
one
to my
is,
screen.
Yeah.
All right, Jason.
Yeah.
So yes, I've converted this one as well, and it looks great. I added a lot more to their demo scene because I want things to move and show the nice little forces and all that, and it works well. The crazy thing about this one though is the big trick, since these are set up very differently than any other projectile that you expected. That you can't preview the projectiles.
They're very standalone. You literally just instantiate and say off you go. Maybe set a target at best.
Yep.
Yeah.
But the big trick for all these projectiles, I'll show them real quick. We got our actor here. We got our effects here. The big thing is the helper turn on object at spawn. All I'm doing for these, I did rework them a little bit, and my inspector's not showing it. Oh, yeah, it is. What's it turning on? Oh, let me open the prefab. We got the effect. All we're doing is turning it on because these trigger when you turn them on. They have all these other custom scripts on them. RFX for effect settings. The collisions have these physics motions, and if you turn these scripts off, they don't work. Right? They will not work if you turn them off. And what I realized is that meant I couldn't really use them. But the one thing was, if you just turn the whole object on, the effect fires off just once. I'm like, well, if we can do that, so now the system basically has the projectile, and it has the things like adding forces, do destroy and trigger, you can do custom scripts to add damage. When the demo scenes do a lot of that, where they actually add damage, so you can see how that's done. But the big trick here is just, when it spawns, turn it on, and that makes the actual effect fire off. The rest is just the logic of how to handle the effect in your game, and that matches all the other projectiles. So you can end up embedding them, but depending on the particles you have, you might need one or two custom little trick scripts. In this case, a trick script is just turning on the damn particle.
Yeah, because I was thinking you'd probably need something, because the other big thing I noticed with their kit is there's a clean delineation between auto aiming ones versus ones that have targets, because there's a lot of heat seeking type stuff, and so you'd need to support that as well. You'd either, because otherwise people are going to have to assign the targets to their script separate from your thing. But I'd imagine you'd probably want a behavior in your system that would allow that to just basically transfer the transform from your, as in a target, from your system into the appropriate bullet, because that could be quite easy. That would just be having some helper to say target object, and then you would basically query for their script and pass it in, right? But I think that's an important one to add, because that's a pretty common occurrence where a system would have a targeted object or a target collection or something, you know.
Yep. And what I do like about that, I know sometimes custom, like saying, oh, you can make your own custom scripts, you can make an override. That scares some people who are newer to it, but it's a very powerful thing, because it does mean you can say, oh, I really like how this one behavior works. Let me make a slightly different modification, override it, change one line, and now you've got your own custom thing. And the other thing is in the inspector here, I've got these very bright console debugs.
I know that they've been hurting my eyes since you showed this.
They hurt your eyes on
purpose. I regret the day I ever showed you how to color.
It's true. Story did teach me the color thing. But the reason why they're so bright is because these are demo scripts for the actors. And, you know, one of the big things that people will always face is, great, I've got a fireball. How do I make it actually cause damage? Problem is, everyone's damage, unless you're using game modules, and even if you're using my game modules, it's going to be different per project. I don't know how you do damage. I don't know your math on damage. Nobody can do that for you, and you should have your own because it's your game. So this is basically a demo script showing how to actually take a thing, the projectile, and cause damage. In the demo, we have just a basic damage value that's attached to all of the projectiles and the projectile data. And then it just registers the hit. So this is, I'm not going to walk through it, but this is where people would go to be like, oh, I see the actor just caused damage. Oh, I see the target just took damage. And really, each one of these projectiles has a projectile data on it, and these projectile datas right now just have speed and damage. And ultimately, you're gonna oh, this is the damage over time one, but ultimately you're gonna make your own version of projectile data that will have your own logic for the calculate damage.
I got a question for you, Andrew.
Yeah.
Do you expose Unity events for when these things happen, so that the people who don't know how to code and don't really understand overriding abstract classes or whatever can get in there and tie things in? I feel like obviously for like me and you and Story and Corvallis and stuff, and probably at least half the people watching, doing a class is probably an easy setup. But I feel like there's probably a lot of people out there, like I said, I talked to Protofactor dude who's an animator building games using assets, a lot of drag drop type stuff. And if you had events like that, is that something that's available, like an on impact, and they could just hook up their damage from their health, whatever health system they're using has a take damage method, and they could just pass that in? Or is there something like that?
Yes, there are all these events.
Perfect. Okay.
There are all these events, and so all the behaviors automatically
are those Unity events or just events?
What's the difference?
The Unity events show up in the inspector, so you can go assign stuff to them.
They are not Unity events.
You should add a layer of those. I maybe as an optional thing, like as an extra script or something, but I would at least consider it for all the people that don't know how to write code, or the designers that are going in and maybe it's already hooked up to do damage. They want to add in some extra visual effects and all that stuff. But I think more so for the people who want to use like your projectile system with some other health system. In fact, I would probably go grab a couple of those health systems and do the integration yourself with some of the more popular ones, because it'd be pretty easy. And like with things like RPG Builder, do an integration into their stats and show how you can do that easily with Unity events and not do any extra code. Ideally, you can just have like a little demo or something.
Yeah. So we do. I'll look into that because it makes sense. I've got everything is event based. You've got all these different life cycle events that you can tap into. There's also a global. So the camera actually has my mouse has to be blown on every once in a while to work.
Of course, me too.
Yeah. So the camera shake on projectile collision is a neat script. It's a global observer, and a global observer basically registers with the factory manager, and the factory manager is a static scriptable object. You don't even need it in the scene. It just always works. And the factory manager looks at every single projectile, and it knows what every projectile is doing. So a global observer can tap into that and then do things when any projectile does things. So the camera
Unity events for that would be nice too, that you could just hook into on the factory.
Yeah, that makes sense too. See? So there you go. So there's lots of ways to hook into the events. There's also another thing you can put on a game object that just can then, you can attach to a spawner or link it to a spawner and say, watch every single projectile that comes out of this spawner. So if you're you're very interested in your player, for instance, and doing something there, you can just watch that spawner and then see every projectile that they do, and then based on what those projectiles do something you want, whatever it is. So
when you're talking about data, like two things that I usually like to add is one is the sender, because you'll often have cases where the context of who fired the shot, whether or not it should hit or collide or whatever, is relevant.
Almost always relevant.
And then the other one is a very simple solution, is to just have a tag array and a payload object. And that way you can, for your filtering and sorting, you can just have stuff like, say you had a statistics or analytics, you could basically say fired 10,000 electric shots. And so you could basically just listen for each of the shots, check its type, aggregate your collection, and then fire events at the appropriate thing. And then things like a payload object can be really useful for any per bullet generator. Like you might have a modifier on a weapon which says every 6th shot gets like plus 5% something or other, and so you could basically pass a payload of modifiers to the bullet. So on collision, it checks for payload modifiers and applies them as it applies or whatever. So they're the ones I usually add. Yeah,
that makes sense. We do have the shooter, the projectile, and the projectile knows who shot it, so you can get some of that. But I think having a very nice open object that can just hold any sort of arbitrary data that people want to pass into it makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, the goal of this was to make it very flexible and customizable because, like I said, it's nice when an asset just does one thing and one thing really well, and you want that one thing. But it's also nice when you can then take that asset and do something else that maybe nobody else wants to do, but I want to do. And those integrations and other things are important to me too. So
those hook-ins highly valuable. That's for me was a good maker or breaker to integrate to my project. How easily can I hook into its behavior and mess around? And yours has all the events I would ever want.
Yeah, that's.
By the way, if you're gonna do a demo scene, I legitimately think a really good example is if you use the asset choreographer. It basically can add an event track to a song. You can just hook up your spawner and you could literally have your bullets firing to the beat, and I think that would look really cool. And it's literally 3 lines of code because at the end of the day, it's just a fire event. Yeah. But I've noticed from my own projects that just adding that adds like a lot of extras, especially if you had things like on certain beats, it changes the bullet type. So now you've got like it switching and doing stuff like. You could do a lot with that. Yeah.
There's one thing at the GDC, and this happened at Unite as well, at the party, which I barely got invited to, by the way. I wasn't going to the party. Then an hour and a half before, I got a secret hookup invite, which was nice. But the party had Wyman, I don't know if you remember this, when the DJ, right before the DJ came out, they did this countdown on the big screen and to get everyone to look at it. And then they had this whole demo by reaction audio or something like that, which was basically a sci-fi scene with a lot of stuff from the asset store.
I couldn't see it. I could hear it and I could kind of see it, but I was upstairs and I'm short and there were way too many tall people in front of me, so I couldn't see anything. So I just gave up. I was like, "Oh, the Unity logo is up there. Oh, cool." And then I was like,
yeah, it was I think it's called reactional audio, and it's basically a scene that's doing the same thing that choreographer does with making the particles and the things and the camera shake all go with the beat of the music. So it's
I missed that. Yeah, I didn't know it was going to be something cool. I just thought it was a DJ, so I was like, "Oh, I can't see what's going on."
It's kind of
they're going to play some music now, and then that's when I went downstairs to the bowling alley.
I didn't even see the bowling alley. Not like I like bowling, but I never.
Oh no, there was a whole bottom floor with like 2 more bars and a bowling alley.
Oh, I went to the top floor with 1 more bar and a photo booth.
Oh yeah, you missed. It was big. It was weird.
You didn't go to the bowling bar, Andrew? Damn, you only went to the photo bar. Rip.
Yeah, it was 4 stories. Got to talk to lots of people. It was really cool. I did get to meet the BattleBit guys, by the way.
Oh.
This is really cool. You guys talking about not having super high fidelity and being really successful. They did exactly that with super blocky characters. Just make a fun game. It was really cool.
Yeah. That's the most important thing. The rest doesn't matter if it's fun.
Yep, yeah. Poor design trumps presentation every time. People get very hung up on presentation. Is it fun?
The presentation is important for marketing. It's important to capture your target audience who always sees that image or that style and thinks, "Ooh, is this a game I like?" But then oftentimes, for me at least, I'll do that and I'll be like, "Oh no, that game has nothing to do with the image I just saw. What this is iOS stuff now."
Especially on the phone.
And then I get annoyed. But in the end, it's people judge the book by the cover, but beyond that, the fun is if it's fun, it could be stick figures. Nobody cares. If you're laughing and having a good time, there you go.
Yep, one thing gets them in the door, the other actually keeps them in there, and that's how you get a real customer.
On the graphics part of it, it's something that I just find fascinating. That game, I'm forgetting the name of it now, but the one where you're collecting objects, the work one. You know what I'm talking about? It's the multiplayer.
That's a lot of them.
It's a new
game where you collect things and it's multiplayer.
It's the horror house stuff. You're going from planet to planet. You're collecting stuff with your friends and your. There's like the tentacle monster boss guy who's like the shopkeeper.
Lethal Company.
Thank you. Yeah. So that's made in Unity, but the bit that fascinates me about that is obviously it looks low fidelity, like it's got a low res filter effect on it, but it's a horror game, and so horror games, what you do need in atmospheric environment stuff, and so it makes people laugh, but that's actually in HDRP because they wanted the volumetric fog, but to keep the performance good despite being HDRP, it's actually rendered at like 480 and then scaled up the resolution. So they're actually doing just like what we were saying before. They're actual, because the low res effect isn't an effect. It is literally rendered at low resolution and scaled up. But they're managing to leverage all of the actual like lighting effects and features that you would want from a high render pipeline. So just that was a cool thing to.
And visually, it adds to the kind of blocky retro feel. It feels like you're looking through a grainy, kind of bad film grain. And it adds to the atmosphere. It would be worse if it was clear.
There you go. Keith asked, by the way, ETA on this. I answered in the chat, but I think weeks is the right answer. This is basically what I'm focused on mostly. But given that Jason just threw some things I have to add now, I'm going to add those, and I do need to redo the object pooling. It's got object pooling built in. But right now it's kind of tightly coupled, and I don't like that. So I need to extract that and make it not coupled at all. So you can just use any object pooler you want, or none, or your own, or and not have to worry about, like, you can just use mine by default, but you can choose to not use.
Yeah, people will probably just want to use. Most are going to want to use yours.
That's my guess. But somebody out there is going to be like, "But I already have an object pooling system."
But projectiles are like the first thing that you pull, so hopefully it's hopefully they haven't picked one yet.
Yeah.
So I did want to show the eyeball real quick, Andrew. So you'd mentioned eyeballs, and that's one of your characters that I pulled in here. That pop-up menu here.
This is actually the first character I pulled into my Legend of the Stones recently as well. It was the flying.
Oh, yeah.
It's a great character for just throwing in because it does cool things and it looks cool and it moves pretty easily, and it can also fly if you want it to fly.
Here's my horrible orc. Yeah, I love that. The eyeball is cool. And then this is my favorite one. So this is the one I was trying to show earlier. Unfortunately, the stun isn't working, so it still kicks me while it's inside me, but eventually it gets spit back out. And switch over to Medusa and smack it. So adding in the passives now, so if you stare at Medusa for too long, you'll turn to stone, and
nice.
They'll all get a passive and an active, and obviously I got to fix that and reparent it to the bone. But I've been having a lot of fun using your stuff, so I just want to say thanks for making lots of cool stuff.
It's a nice, easy plug and play. I enjoy it. The eyeball's looking good.
Yeah, you're like my D&D theme of stuff. The one thing I haven't figured out yet is if you're a cube and you eat somebody and you change forms, I think I'm gonna have to make you spit them out, because otherwise, I died. Yeah, when you die, it bugs out. But when if you run around and transform into an eyeball, it looks really weird when you've just got you're running around as an eyeball with somebody else stuck in the middle of you. So
you don't have people stuck in your eyeballs, Jason? That's called seeing them.
Galileo VR asked how multiplayer friendly it is. It's 100% multiplayer. That's just running in host mode. It's built multiplayer first, so it runs dedicated server or hosted, and then the plan for it is 5 players by default, but I'll probably just support 2 to 8, and then it's all single person per team. But there's no reason that wouldn't be adjustable too. I actually took the core work from the multiplayer mastery course and just started. I thought, like, hey, what would it take to turn this into a MOBA? And it turned out it was about 2 days of effort. So got that switched over, and then decided it was actually fun, and I tried to build it out as a game and see what happens. So
awesome.
I should have a playable demo for us next week, so we can all hop in, and you can all fuck me up at the game that I made and show me all the crashes and stuff. But I want to have at least a 4-player, 5-player playable version next week where we can jump in with 18 classes. I just have to go add like another 15 passive abilities and the code for those. But it's actually really simple. I want to do some videos on the process of that. When you've got a modular system for combat and abilities, it becomes really easy. In fact, I was going to add the shield ability that I put in for the rhinoceros guy. So the rhinoceros beetle, which just looks like the dude from what is that? Bug's Life, like the guy that they fly around on.
Oh
and,
yeah. That one.
Yeah. So when I wanted to add him, I wanted to give him a passive ability, and his was one of the first. I just decided to give him a shield. So it's like an armor that buffs up shield. And at first, for a few minutes, I put in a new variable for the shield amount. And then I started going through and hooking things up and adding code. Then I realized I don't actually need this variable because everything's so modular that I just add a buff that modifies a pool. And then that pool is a new shield pool. And the only change to my code was that when I do damage, I just see if I have a shield on there and then take stuff out of the shield pool. So ended up being about 4 lines of code change to add the whole thing. Oh, plus like another 2 lines for the UI because I wanted to add a slider that showed up there at the top over the shield. But yeah, it made it really simple. Plus, it all worked basically at runtime. So I could go in and add my pools and stuff, add the whole ability, hook it on, and it just kind of works doing it without changing anything. It's all in scriptable objects. So I can do it while I'm playing and running, go in, modify, add abilities. And other than the UI, refreshing my icon, everything works.
Awesome. So, making games that we'll be able to play together sounds pretty fun.
Yeah. Yeah, it should be fun. The other thing I didn't show you. I'll show you real quick. The last bit. See, I'm always looking for feedback and ideas. And if anybody here or in chat has some feedback or ideas, please let me know. But the other thing I've added in here, let's see, it's randomized. Pick a couple. Yeah, you can be a tower right now or a chicken too. Not good options. But
I want to be a chicken. That's my life's dream.
Well, that is an option, but right now it's rotated 90 degrees. Oh, and the towers are moving accidentally. But yeah, see, here's a chicken. But the thing I was going to show you is the spawners are the same way. So you pick your roles. The UI for it got broken, but you pick the ones that you want, and then it'll spawn them. And when the AI is not broken, they'll run out, and they're just the creeps that go out from the spawners and push, and then they use the abilities and the classes that you gave them. Apparently, I broke it sometime last night, but yeah, that's the state of things. So get ready to play next week and kick my ass, I assume.
I'm putting on my beta tester gloves, okay? We're ready.
And if you got any ideas for abilities, I need active abilities and passive ones. I've got them for some of the guys, especially Andrew's ones. I've got a couple of them down. But yeah, I'm looking for more. So if you got cool, I've mostly just stolen League of Legends abilities. That's my primary source of inspiration. Is like, oh yeah, like the caterpillar guy turns into a Rammus ball, rolls around, and then does damage when he hits. Gelatinous Cube was easy. That was an obvious one. He should eat you.
Yeah. I want you to add one sci-fi character that is just an alien with.
I'm adding at least 6. I'm going to add in a full set of Protofactor ones.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, Protofactor is after I get the abilities working for these 12. I've got 6 ears and 6 insects. I'm going to do 6 Protofactor ones. I just want to make sure that I don't want to get too many in there that don't work. So I want to get these ones working, and then I'm going to add those in next. Yeah, because I want it to be not just RPG fantasy-ish, but like science wild fantasy. Shit like all over the place. Pop in some anime characters. You make whatever the hell you want. I don't care.
my neuron was activated when you said anime. I've got recommendations if you ever need it. So.
Yeah. I was thinking more like kind of like a Kingdom Hearts style. Like you're jumping in, you're switching between things and doing combos on stuff. So having like a big variety of things, and then just giving them some abilities that interact and have some synergy is where it'd be fun. And then I think the most fun part will be figuring out the different combinations and trying those out. So I want to go with like 10 to 15 minute matches. So they're pretty quick, and then you go back in and try out different combos, kind of like Teamfight Tactics, where like I go in like, hey, this time I want to try snipers, this time I want to try tanks or bruisers or whatever the fuck it is for this season, And I felt like you do kind of the same thing, but with the MOBA.
Yeah, it seems like a super fun sandbox. Like mixing and mashing them and trying out weird combinations definitely seems like the interesting vibe for it. I want to know what my chicken robot army. What is the build comp on that?
That's kind of what I was thinking. Yeah, being able to mix and match and do exactly those. Like, have fun. And then I was going to make it variable for the host, so the host can pick. You can have one thing or 5 or 6, however many the max is that works with the keyboard, but make it so that you could have a variable number of them and do the same for the spawners, and just kind of let people kind of customize the game and the match mode and figure out what's most fun instead of me guessing. I'm going with 4 because that's QWER. That's the only reason.
Yeah, bounce around what you got, and that's why when we get that play test, we'll have even more ideas. They'll be flowing.
Yep, it should be fun. So yeah, anybody interested, make sure you come back next week and check it out. If you want to see the code and you're in the course, it'll be up on the resources page too. You can go through and dig through that stuff and see if there's useful info there. Anybody got anything else interesting this week before we wrap it up?
Sure, why not? I finished up the project I've been doing for 2 months. Bloated beyond where it should have been, but it was a fun animation test. I mentioned before I was playing like Persona 3 Reloaded, decided to do a mod where I just swap out one character wholesale. And this was way harder than I initially expected. Because when you do that, you have to recreate every animation that character had in them in order to not soft lock your turn-based game. So there's links to the YouTube video just for a little debug footage. The mod is out now. So if you want to swap your boss character with fellow VTuber Mori Calliope, by all means. It was fun to put together with what was available, fun to collect the animations and figure that out. And I learned so much about Unreal's build system. My lord, so much. And plenty of helpful people in like the modding Discord. It was a journey.
Nice. Well, I just put the link in there so everybody can go check it out. That sounds cool. I'm gonna go watch it too. It's only 1 minute. So how difficult was it? Was it super painful?
It was a high difficulty because I've not done a mod like this before for this game. Since it was in Unreal, there was already a lot of like communal knowledge for how to do it, but I had to still wait for other modding tools, people better than I, to build them out to make certain processes easier, and us being able to comb through certain components of the game to recreate them. For instance, hair physics was not something we could recreate, so I had to do all that by hand. And the hand animations were by far the hardest part, because every animation had to be redone more or less from scratch and fit the original frame count that the previous animation worked in. So making it both work aesthetically and work under those limitations was a fun back and forth, but also a very hard one.
And he made the mistake of asking me for feedback, so you know.
Oh yeah, that was another like 3 weeks minimum.
Oh, it looks like one of our viewers in chat, Richard, made a Toon Roman Republican army and put the code in there. So if you're watching live, you can probably grab that, and whoever gets it first, go check that out. I'm gonna have to pull that one up. I have not seen that.
It's been in the chat for 30 seconds. I'm sure it's been claimed already.
Ooh, speaking of stuff, there is a humble bundle for Cinti assets, everyone's favorite low poly manufacturer. That's really, really good. It had a bunch of assets I myself didn't even own yet. The Cinti 2 number 2 remix. So definitely want to check that out if you want to grab some cool Cinti stuff. I, for one, as well, love the fact that they give it from the Cinti website, so you can import it to either like Unity or Unreal. Because I like throwing around assets in both.
I like it when they're in the asset store, so that way I can just go to the asset store tab and hit import. I'm too lazy to go other places. Speaking of that, I saw the asset manager preview stuff and got to play with that a bit. It's actually pretty damn cool. I'm looking forward to using that in the future. There's some really promising stuff there. I feel like it's going to be hopefully the new way that I pull in assets into the project, after it gets a couple more updates and stuff. Which I think it'd be really nice, because you just grab things in and you don't have to grab down a whole pack. You don't have to put it all in. Like what I used to do is like export things to an asset pack, and with this thing, you can basically upload all of my prefabs and assets separately and then just pull them down. So it's pretty interesting and way cooler than I expected. Like I said, when I first heard about it, I thought it was going to be kind of not very useful, because I don't have a big team of artists and stuff that I'm working with. But after looking at it, and the workflow improvements actually drastically better, because you can do some things that really speed things up. and just make it easier for me to find stuff. Kind of like I've been using that asset data or asset inventory 2 thing since we talked about it last week or the week before, and it's pretty handy, but it's definitely not perfect because it's got to pull everything down, and I just have too many things. It still hasn't finished indexing everything. I feel like if I had a small number of assets, it'd be fine, but
yeah,
it's kind of crazy. There was something else I was going to mention from the chat, but I cannot remember what it was anymore. I don't know. Something else exciting in there. Did I miss anything super exciting?
No, but I did see Asset Manager at GDC, and I agree. It looks very interesting and promising.
Yeah. With the new asset manager, I think you can sign up for the beta now. I don't know if it's public. I don't know how the acceptance is, but I know I think I signed up for it a while ago and got in. I went to go sign up for it again and realized I was actually already in it because I had signed up for the first time, but I just never got around to using it because I didn't think it was going to be cool. Yeah. But essentially, so for everybody who's wondering why I thought it was cool, what you can do is like take your art, your assets, you can take a prefab that you've got, like a character, right click, hit upload to asset manager, and then in all of your projects, you can just go grab that character and pull it down without having to go grab the asset pack or any of the other stuff. And then it's got filtering and searching and all that kind of stuff in there too. So it made it really easy to do that kind of stuff. It's got nice previews and you can customize the previews. I didn't need to though. I just wanted to see, like, you know, I put in like, I think the eyeball, and I started putting in a couple of your characters and a couple of my custom ones to try it out, and it's been working great. So
yeah,
big fan. I really hope that long term it will get to the point where I can see like all of my assets from the asset store. That would be perfect. Until then though, it's still really, really handy. But if it got to that point, it'd be like, you know, I would use it as my default. I probably wouldn't even go to the asset store. Well, you know, except for to look at sales and, you know, like do discovery stuff. But,
yeah, and I'm pretty sure most people don't enjoy importing through Package Manager your assets. So.
What I don't enjoy is importing a whole bunch of stuff to try to figure out like the one thing that I want, because most of the time I want one thing out of a pack, not the entire pack, but it's 2 gigs or
plus, it's not just the import, right? It's the import followed by, okay, you just imported a large pack that's got 10,000 audio files. We're going to sit and generate a meta file for each and every one of these before you've even decided if you want to look at any of them. It's like, can I not just pick a few and look at them? No, we're going to sit and generate twice as much content first.
So, but by downloading all that, too, these are cached on your system. You have to go find that folder to get removed that cache. Otherwise, you're going to have that 2 gigs forever.
Yeah. Oh, I delete that folder once a week. Yeah, because I constantly run out of space from that damn folder.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. That's a cool one though. So if you haven't checked out the beta, I would go try that out and screw around with it. I don't know the page. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Asset Manager beta. That one's really cool. Here it is. Using the Unity Asset Manager. Where's the beta part? It's here some. Here, I'll put the main page there, and then does it have the? Oh, here it is. Learn more. How do you? Who has access? I have no idea where you get it. I'm sure you find it somewhere. Just look on Google.
You can sift through.
Yeah. I have not found it yet, but it's. I'll put it in the description too if I find it soon. I know I have it because, like I said, I went and signed up for it again. Visual crazy thing of awesome. Okay. We're signed up for new. Okay, I started reading through the chat like I don't know how to do anything on a podcast. Anybody got anything else before we wrap up for the week?
The asset manager thing's on your cloud dashboard, so whenever you want to try that out, I think you have to sign into your Unity Cloud stuff because that's why I'm seeing the little beta tab. Otherwise, no.
You might have to go sign up in that. You might have to click and approve or something, but you might already be in it too. Maybe it's open now. I'm not sure.
Potentially, but yeah, great exchange.
Like can't wait for the future.
Yeah, next week we get to play a game together. It's game day, so stay tuned.
Yes, next week's going to be a fun one. Everybody can kick my ass. If anybody's got ideas for abilities and stuff, drop them in the comments. I think want to take as many as possible. Oh, one last thing. I remember now the final thing that I needed to mention before we go. Everybody here, if and in chat, did you play Command and Conquer Generals?
Nope.
Yes, no. Story?
I don't know of this.
Wasn't that the mobile game?
No, we've already had this conversation. You've shown me what you're going to
No,
say.
yeah, no. It's the RTS from the 90s from Westwood. It was like, I would say, the last really great RTS, Command and Conquer 0 Hour, General 0 Hour. But I met a guy at GDC who's making a spiritual successor for it, and it is really, really freaking cool. Let me pull up the page for it real quick. It's
also, does it have the wonderful voice lines? The voice lines are so many of the memes are from the amazing work of I need some shoes.
Yes. So it's going to have some of those. I don't know. You'll have to go check it out. I'm going to put the link in chat. I'm going to share it. But when I saw this thing at GDC, I lit up, and it was probably one of the most, if not the most exciting thing that I saw. I think it probably was the most exciting thing because it's something I've been wanting somebody to make forever. And it looks great. So if you haven't checked it out, if you like RTSs, go check it out. They're based in Turkey, and I guess they've been building it for just over a year. They've got a demo, and it's multiplayer built in Unity dots. So it's built for super scale. From the little bit of demos that I've seen so far, it looks like it's taking advantage of that stuff and doing some really cool stuff. So yeah, if you like Command & Conquer, like I did, or you want to see a dots game, I think it's worth checking out.
Nice, 100%.
I'm very excited to play it. I want to play the demo very soon. I'm not going to talk more about it because I don't know what all I can say. But yeah, it's fun stuff. Anyway, that's all I've got for this week. Story, you got any final words for the week?
No, my final words will be I don't know. Yeah. Have a good weekend, I guess. I'm going to go and listen to an audiobook and chill. This is the start of my weekend too, so I'm going to just relax for the rest of the week.
I am going to sit and code.
I'm pretty sure my final words will be, "That's not a lion."
All right. Cool. Well, yeah, it was great seeing everybody again. If you're here with us live, make sure you hit the thumbs up button. If you're watching later, do the same. And if you haven't already gone to Jason Story's Ko-fi and Discord page, the link is in the description, and it's going to pop up as soon as I find it right there. So you can go check it out. Lots of good, interesting discussion. You can just go lurk and watch, or join the conversations. It's still lots of fun. I still just sit back and lurk on your channel. I'm afraid to get into a discussion because I know I'm going to end up spending yesterday. So we were in the multiplayer mastery course call yesterday, and Story was there, and we were talking, and I didn't realize we were there for like almost 3 hours just talking. It was like my wife came, she's like, "How long is this call exactly?" I'm like, "Oh, I didn't even realize we're just hanging out. It's been like 3 hours now, and just chatting and having interesting discussions." So get some of that in Story's Discord. Go check that out. And of course, if you haven't already subscribed to Power, how do you pronounce this, Corvallis?
Corvius. It's like my normal name. Did it so for better SEO, and I think it's cute. Corvallis.
Power Corvius. Okay. Got it. I just wanted to make sure I said it right. I knew I was going to pronounce it wrong. Are you sure it's not like French, like Power Corvaux?
Look, I took 3 years of French, and I still can barely speak it. Maybe a little bit leaked in for the EU.
Oh, it's good stuff. Corvius. Yeah, so go sign up. So did you rename the channel too to Power Corvius?
Yeah, the main titling, the @ is still 2000, just because I haven't bothered to do that, and that's a little bit more of a launch. But I am basically reformatting it. Want to redo my thumbnails. Want to get into making more content as well. The mod was the first step in one aspect, and yeah, hopefully a lot more stuff soon. Also going to be experimenting with another little project that should be soonish. We just say soonish trademark, so I can't be called out for having bad deadlines. Okay.
Nice. Cool. And then Andrew, any last things you got coming up?
Nope. There's sales on the Asset Store right now, but aside from that,
all right.
Just got. Oh, I mean, I guess I've been streaming a lot with this projectile thing. So if you want to join my streams, come to the Discord, and I always at everybody when I do a stream. So
yeah, get some requests there if you got ideas, things that you want to see in that thing. And then go check out some of Andrew's characters. It's really cool. Having a project where I can use your characters and actually having like a good use for them. That's not a demo. I've tried to pull them into MMOs and stuff, but it's like stuff I can't show. And it's really cool when I got characters of yours that I can pull in and show because they look really good. Like they look much better in game, and I haven't even done any lighting or URP updates. It's just they're a lot of fun to work with too, and the variation's cool. So I get to go in and play around and figure out what I want it to look like.
Yeah, great. It's good to hear.
Yeah. Anyway, I just want to say that. Thanks, and those things are awesome. Anyway, thanks for joining us, everybody. If you got questions, comments, leave them down below, and if not, just make sure you subscribe, and we will see you again next week.
See y'all soon.